This is the Tom Baby Tales, and I'm your host, Shannon Evans. I write about a small town in northeast Mississippi called Columbus. Sometimes I write about the rest of the state. This episode is titled The Rise of Machine Gun Kelly from Bootlegger to Notorious Kidnapper. Now, this is Machine Gun Kelly, the original one, not the musician of today. So I want to welcome you back to Tom Bigby Tales, the podcast where we dig up the hidden histories and forgotten legends that lie right beneath the fertile soil that is part of our region, the Black Belt Prairie. Today, we're unearthing a dark and surprising footnote in the history of Northeast Mississippi. We're going to talk about a name that is synonymous with the 1930s crime era, and it's Machine Gun Kelly. So picture the gangster archetype, the Thompson machine gun, the fedora, the bank robbery. George Kelly Barnes, or Machine Gun Kelly, was one of the FBI's first ever public enemies. He was a notorious bootlegger and kidnapper whose crimes helped launch the modern FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He was a sensation of the Prohibition era, but before the machine gun, before the wife, Catherine Thorne Kelly, who helped him make himself infamous, and long before Alcatraz, the man known as George Kelly Barnes was an awkward, failing student right here in the Tombigbee region, attending Mississippi A&M, what we now call Mississippi State University. Yes, George was enrolled in September of 1917 with the help of his mother. He never graduated high school. Barnes enrolled at the Agriculture and Mechanical School of the state of Mississippi. It was a rigorous environment. Mississippi A&M was built on the values of practical study, hard work, and a quasi-military structure, especially during World War I, that was originally designed by Stephen D. Lee. Now, Barnes was there to study agriculture, the practical science of the South. His mother, an upstanding woman, had even written the college president to learn the requirements that would allow him to attend. The college had promised to endeavor to serve his best interests. Unfortunately for George, these best interests didn't align with his own. He was an academic disaster. Kelly was a wealthy kid from Memphis who clearly did not take to the discipline of the A&M University. His academic record, which can be found in the university archives, is a complete disaster. He received an incomplete in military science, a 0 in woodwork, and a stream of C's and D's in his other courses. His single highest grade, a C plus, was in hygiene. But the real trouble was his conduct. Kelly was constantly racking up demerits. According to the archives, he accumulated a staggering 31 demerits in his first semester alone. As the second semester started, he earned another 24 merits in just the first few weeks. A professor at the time recalled a desperate move by Barnes. He climbed the flagpole to repair the pulley at the top, hoping to wash out some of his demerits. It didn't work. By January 27, 1918, after just a semester and a half, George Barnes left the college. His father, an insurance executive, was so thoroughly disgraced by his son's failure that he disowned him. And some would argue his life of crime began almost immediately. I would argue it was already in place. You see, George knew that his father was a philanderer. And so before he left for college, while he was still in high school and prior to becoming a high school dropout, he blackmailed his father into the fact that he would not tell on his father's indiscretions to his father's wife, Kelly's mother. If his father would give him more spending money, which he promptly invested in more bootleg liquor to sell, because he was selling it on the black market, making quite the handy pocket money. And if his father gave him a more liberal use of the family car, he would not tell. So now he's out of college. He's been disowned. And now he comes back and figures out that he can actually make more money working as a bootlegger and than he could if he worked a regular job. But he did try. After failing out of A&M, Kelly eloped with a young woman named Geneva Ramsey, and they soon had 2 sons. But unable to hold down a legitimate job to support his family, he turned back to the booming underground industry of Prohibition-era bootlegging, something that he had been successful with in high school and in college. He found he had a knack for moving and selling illegal liquor across the South, not just across schools. It was more profitable than his honest attempts at work, and he enjoyed the cash and the notoriety. The strain of this new life, coupled with his alcohol abuse and criminal behaviors, pretty much ended his marriage. He left his first family behind and moved west, adopting the alias George R. Kelly to protect the respectable Barnes name, allegedly. He was a low-level criminal running illegal liquor from Memphis all the way to New Mexico. Kelly's bootlegging career earned him a short stint in the New Mexico jails, and then in 1928, he served a sentence in Leavenworth Penitentiary in Kansas for smuggling liquor onto an Indian reservation. It was inside the walls of Leavenworth that the former Mississippi State flunkout got his true vocational training. He met hardened bank robbers, the Frank Nash and Thomas Holden. He became acquainted with the men who would teach him how to pull off major scores. The small-time rum runner was now an apprentice to serious criminal underworld personas. Upon his release in 1930, Kelly then met Catherine Thorne, a seasoned criminal with an outlaw family background. Catherine was the true mastermind of the Machine Gun Kelly image. George was, by many accounts, a bit of a low-profile minor criminal with nice manners. But Catherine had ambition. She was the one who bought him his first and most iconic accessory, the Thompson machine gun. She forced him to practice his marksmanship, even though he reportedly wasn't a huge fan of firearms. She then began a brilliant marketing campaign, spreading stories of his exploits and handing out spent bullet casings to associates at illegal drinking clubs, calling them souvenirs from Machine Gun Kelly. It was Catherine's influence that encouraged him to expand his petty bootlegging to bank robbery, often in small-town Mississippi and Texas. By the early 1930s, the crime wave was heating up, and Kelly was pulling off bank jobs. But with the Great Depression, the banks were sometimes running short on cash. The Kellys needed a bigger payday to sustain their extravagant lifestyle, which included high-powered automobiles and expensive jewelry. As logical and terrifying as the evolution of their criminal career was, kidnapping was next on their list. In 1932, Congress had passed the Lindbergh kidnapping law, making the crime a federal offense if the victim crossed state lines. Kidnapping was now the ultimate high-stakes gamble, and the Kellys chose their target, Oklahoma oil tycoon Charles F. Urschel. On the night of July 22, 1933, Kelly and his accomplice Albert Bates entered Urschel's home. They grabbed Urschel and his friend Walter Jarrett, not sure which was which. They soon released Jarrett and drove Urschel hundreds of miles to a remote ranch near Paradise, Texas, the ranch owned by Catherine's family. The ransom they charged was a staggering $200,000. This crime was J. Edgar Hoover's big moment. He was determined to use the case to gain the national adoration and respect for his new agency, the Bureau. The Bureau coordinated a multi-state manhunt tracking down the serial numbers of the ransom money. Now, Kelly made a fundamental mistake. He underestimated his victim. Though Urschel was blindfolded most of the time, he was a shrewd observer. He quietly noted every detail he could hear. He kept track of time, counted the flights overhead to estimate the flight path, and observed the mundane sounds of the ranch, like the milking of a cow, to give the FBI clues about the environment, if he was finally free. Urschel's intelligence gathering did prove invaluable. Once he was released, the clues led the FBI right to the Texas ranch, and they quickly arrested the Kellys' accomplices, including Catherine's parents, the owners of the ranch. The federal net was closing quickly on the public enemies. The search led agents back to Memphis, Tennessee, the place where George Kelly Barnes had grown up, and the state where his criminal life had truly begun with small-time bootlegging and bank jobs. In the early hours of September 26, 1933, FBI agents and Memphis police raided the house where George and Catherine Kelly were hiding. It was a swift, anticlimactic end to a sensational career. The notorious Machine Gun Kelly, the man his wife had marketed as a ruthless killer, was reportedly captured without a weapon. It is widely reported that he threw up his hands and shouted the line that would forever define his lack of courage. Don't shoot, G-men, don't shoot. It didn't matter if the quote was entirely true. Hoover seized on it to paint Kelly as a whimpering coward, contrasting him with the courageous new federal agents that were cleaning up America. The conviction was rapid and a massive victory for the fledgling FBI. The Kellys were tried in the South's first major federal kidnapping case. On October 12, 1933, George Kelly Barnes and his wife Catherine were sentenced to life imprisonment. The man who couldn't handle the rules of a college campus would now spend the rest of his life under the strict rules of the federal prison system, starting with the most secure prison in the country, Alcatraz. George Kelly Barnes' first chapter was one of diminished status. At Alcatraz, the myth created by Catherine completely collapsed. According to fellow inmates, he was a model prisoner who was constantly boasting and telling exaggerated tall tales about his violent past. The truly hardened criminals there mocked him, giving the notorious Machine Gun Kelly a new nickname, Pop Gun Kelly, after the cork guns popular with little children. The man who scared the public into giving J. Edgar Hoover immense power was, in reality, a blowhard who never worked in the prison laundry as an altar boy in the chapel and was later transferred to Leavenworth, where he died of a heart attack on his 59th birthday in 1954. This is the ultimate Tom Bigby tale of an infamous American outlaw. His journey to public enemy didn't begin in a dark alley or a smoky bar. It began, in many ways, with his failure to finish high school in Memphis and then his failure to finish college right here at Mississippi State. His inability to cope with a few dozen demerits at a military-style college set him adrift. He flunked out of college and then, through bootlegging, prison, and the influence of a shrewd wife, flunked his way up the criminal ranks to become one of the most recognized faces of his era. The local boy who couldn't manage agriculture ended up planting the seeds of his own destruction. And in doing so, he helped give birth to the most powerful federal police force in the world. It is a sobering thought that one of the most famous criminals of the 20th century, a man who terrified the nation, was once just a struggling student in our own backyard. Go Dogs. Thank you for listening to this history of our town and our community and our state and of our Tombigbee River area. Join us next time for more Tombigbee Tales. Until then, I'm Shannon Evans.